What up, Mikey Scrooge? Good from Michael here, and welcome, sports fans, to another edition of Sports Talk. And if this is your first time tuning in since the new year, Happy New Year to everybody as well. I ran in the 1-1 run on New Year's Day. That's the shirt I'm wearing. Really comfortable shirt, by the way. But we're not here to talk about how comfortable the shirt is or running or anything like that. We're here to talk about sports. So we're going to recap the Western Michigan Wisconsin Cotton Bowl. We'll also talk about Michigan and their Orange Bowl loss. Talk about the rest of the college football scoreboard from the bowl games. Yeah, I was wrong on quite a bit of those last week, if you noticed. And we'll also talk about the NFL playoffs. I'll give my predictions about who I think is going to go to the Super Bowl and win, which, if it's anything like the college football predictions I've had, they've been dead wrong. And we'll talk about the NFL scores from the final week of the regular season. And also, we'll talk about the coaches that got fired. There actually, surprisingly, was not any coaches that were fired on Monday, which was quite surprising. But there were a few fired Sunday, and of course, a few that were fired before the end of the season. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, we'll talk about the Cotton Bowl first, Western Michigan against Wisconsin. And everyone kind of thought coming in Wisconsin's going to dominate Western, and it looked like it early on. I gave 3 keys to the game on Twitter. Before the game, and I said Western's going to have to stop Wisconsin's run game, which they definitely did not do early on. They did not shut down the run. Wisconsin was able to manhandle Western in the first quarter, and that's how the Badgers jumped out to a 14-0 lead, which it looked like they were going to run away with the game. But then after that, Western's defense settled in. They made great second-half adjustments, were able to stop Wisconsin's run for the rest of the game mainly. Number 2 is they were going to have to win the battle at the line, which they lost early on, but then they ended up winning in the second half, I would say. They definitely won on that defensive line to able to penetrate and stop the run. Their offensive line didn't, I think, do as good of a job protecting Terrell. I know they were playing Wisconsin, a team that has much bigger defensive line than Western's offensive line. So Terrell felt more pressure today in that game than what he ever had felt, really, all season long. And Western fumbled it 4 times. They recovered every single one. There was one that Jarvion Franklin fumbled, and it looked like Wisconsin recovered, and it was when they were going in for that final touchdown they ended up getting. And I thought, oh, gosh, we lost it. That's it, game over. And then somehow we ended up coming up with the ball again, which was amazing because he was the only one down there for Western in the pile, and there was like a couple of Wisconsin guys down there. So I'm like, wow, how did he rip that one back? But he did. And then the third one is they were going to have to win the turnover battle, and they didn't do that. Western only had 1 turnover. Wisconsin didn't have a turnover. The 1 turnover that Western had was an interception. Wisconsin had just punted, and Western had the ball. They were down 17-10, and they had it at their own 3-yard line. And first play of the drive, Zach Terrell dropped back to pass, and he ended up throwing an interception right over the middle of the field, by the way, might I add. He threw it right over the middle of the field. And hold on one second. My computer actually started talking, so I'm going to try to turn down the volume here. But he threw it right over the middle of the field, and TJ Edwards ended up picking off the pass. And by the way, he was a former commitment to Western Michigan under PJ Fleck. So it's kind of ironic that he makes the interception to give Wisconsin, the chance to go in for another touchdown, which they did 3 plays later. The other thing that really hurt Western yesterday was Troy Fumagalli. It seemed to be he made every catch that was thrown to him except for one. Wisconsin, I said, I didn't put this on Twitter or anything, but I said before the game they're probably going to throw the ball less than 15 times in this game. They threw it 14 times, and they completed 13 passes. The one incomplete pass was a drop by Troy Fumagalli. And if he had caught, if he hadn't dropped it, it would have been a touchdown in the end zone. So Wisconsin would have ended up with 28 points instead of 24. But, it seemed to be every big third down late in the game, he caught a pass to essentially seal the game. Western had Wisconsin at like a 3rd and 7 late in the game. If they had stopped Wisconsin on the play, Western would have had a chance to get the ball back and take it down the field to have a chance to score a touchdown and go for 2 to try to tie it. But they found Troy Fumagalli for about 24 yards down the field, And, it seemed to be all day. Western would have, Wisconsin backed up into a 3rd and 10 or a 3rd and 12 or a 3rd and 15, and they would convert. Now, they didn't convert every single one. They were 7 of 11 on 3rd downs, but it just seemed like that's the way it was going, is that they were converting a lot. So after that first quarter where Wisconsin had 100 total rush yards, they didn't end up with a whole lot after that. Now my computer isn't working, won't even let me go down. I don't get. Oh, great! Just when you want to talk about stats, you can't even do it. So, well, let's go over some of the stats at least that I can see. We'll start talking about Western Michigan's passing stats. So Zach Terrell on the day was 16 to 28 for 157 yards. He threw 1 touchdown. Which the 1 touchdown, by the way, was a crazy one. 4th down, Western had the ball. Terrell scrambled out to his right, and he just heaved it toward the end zone. I'm like, well, it looked like first off when he threw it, it was going to go out of the back of the end zone. I was like, there's like no way that he's going to end up. There's no way he's going to complete this pass. And then Corey Davis somehow hauls it down. It looked like the Wisconsin guy was like totally interfering with Davis on the play, which there was no flag thrown, but it didn't matter because Davis caught the touchdown pass, which was just a fantastic play. Wisconsin's quarterbacks combined were 13 of 14 on the day for 178 yards and 1 touchdown, and that was thrown by Alex Hornibrook. And that was the one that Troy Fumagalli caught in the back of the end zone. Hornibrook got pressured. He was hit as he threw the ball, and he ended up getting it out of there and into the end zone for a touchdown. And they did get some pressure on him and Bart Houston because there was 1 sack at least of Bart Houston in the game. Well, they might have got 2 because there was one, I think he scrambled and he ended up losing a couple yards out of bounds, and I think you would count that as a sack because he was actually hit going out. But let's see, Jamari Bogan had 16, going to the rushing stats now, Jamari Bogan had 16 carries for 58 yards, and this computer still doesn't want to cooperate with me for some reason. Okay, now we're getting it to go. All right, Jamari Bogan, 16 carries, 58 yards. Jarvion Franklin, 7 carries, 53 yards. Terrell had 7 carries for 14 yards. So the Broncos on the day had 123 total yards rushing. Now, I said Wisconsin had over 100 yards rushing at the end of the first quarter. Well, they only ended up with 184. So Western did a good job the last 3 quarters stopping the Wisconsin run. Corey Clement was the leading rusher on the day, 22 carries, 71 yards, and he started off really, really hot, and he only averaged 3.2 yards a carry, so that was pretty good. Jazz Peavy, 3 carries, 50 yards. Quintez Cephas, 2 for 34. Dari, oh my gosh, Ogabolia, I butchered that one, 5 for 22, and Austin Ramish, 1 for 10. So Fumagalli was the one that hurt the Broncos receiving. He had 6 catches for 83 yards. Corey Davis, he finished out his Western career, 6 receptions, 73 yards and 1 touchdown. He had a long of 22, and I think that was the first pass he caught of the game, I believe, was that one. And my computer once again does not want to cooperate with me and let me move down to see the rest of the stats. Oh, geez, just the problems you deal with when you're trying to work here and get a video out to you guys. Jeez. So on the day, Asante Brown led the Broncos with 12 tackles. 7 of those were solo. TJ Edwards led Wisconsin. He had 10 total tackles. So there were 2 sacks Sunday. Robert Spillane ended up with a sack, and so did Caleb Bailey. Vince Beagle, and TJ Watt each ended up with a sack on Terrell. So both teams had 2 sacks on the day. Butch Hampton made a 27-yard field goal. He was 1 for 2, though, on the extra points. The one he missed was the one that would have made it a 7-point game. So it wasn't good that he missed that. But, we'll go over the team stats here as soon as they pop up, but we'll talk about Western Michigan and what their future holds for next year Oh yeah, and another key I think I said at the game was maybe I didn't say win at the line. I think I said control the clock. I think my three keys to the game were control the clock, stop the run, and limit the turnover element. They just barely lost the time of possession. Early on, I mean, Wisconsin was dominating time of possession. It was like first quarter, it was like basically it was like 11 minutes to 3 minutes with 1 minute remaining in the first quarter. But by the end of the game, Wisconsin had the ball for 10 more seconds. That was it. If it wasn't for that final drive of Wisconsin and Western being able to get the ball back, Western would have actually outpossessed Wisconsin the rest of the game. So overall, Western got 280 yards to Wisconsin's 362. Western was 5 of 11 on third down. They were 2 for 2 on fourth down. Wisconsin, like I said, was 7 of 11. And one turnover in the game, and that was by Western. Both teams had 18 first downs, so that was quite impressive. So next season for the Broncos, so they finished 13-1. Of course, they didn't end up with a perfect season, but nobody, by the way, before we talk about the future of the Broncos, should be disappointed in the fact they lost the Cotton Bowl. They were playing a better team in Wisconsin. They were playing another Big Ten team, the third one they played this year. And, you know, I'm not saying that I'm satisfied with the loss. I was disappointed, too. I had to hold back tears while I was watching the game on TV. It was, you know, it was something I hadn't seen all season. I didn't see Western lose. But it's still the greatest season they've ever played in football, you know, school history. I know they've had undefeated. They had an 8-0 season back in the 40s, but that doesn't really compare to this because think about all that's happened with this team. All the national exposure they've got. They've been on ESPN, CBS Sports Network, multiple games. All the outlets have been talking about Western all year. PJ Fleck went on the ESPN Car Wash, you know, which he went on like every single show basically on ESPN. You know, they beat two Big Ten teams. They beat their rivals. They went undefeated in Mid-American Conference play. They cracked the top 25 for the first time in both polls and the college football playoff in school history. They won the Mid-American Conference title game. They got a chance to go to the Cotton Bowl. They were basically the Group of 5 champion there. They ended up having ESPN Game Day come to campus. Corey Davis set the all-time receiving mark in NCAA football history. Zach Terrell wins the academic Heisman. And Corey Davis also was an All-American, and you had a bunch of All-MAC selections as well. I mean, there's so much that I could go on and talk about with this team. And by the way, I think the touchdown that Corey Davis and Zach Terrell had yesterday, they hooked up, tied the NCAA record for a receiving quarterback combo in NCAA history as well. They were trailing, I think, by 1 coming into the game. They ended up tying that mark. So there's so much, you know, positive things to go around with Western. By the way, another number 1 recruiting class in the Mid-American Conference, by the way, coming in. So much positive things coming out of this year. One loss is, you know, yeah, it puts a little stain on it, but you know what? Look at the bigger picture that happened this year for Western. You had big crowds at the games, too. You had fans just so interested in Western football this year. You know, and I hope those fans that were interested, that became interested this year, stick around next year, too. That this isn't just going to be like a one-time thing where they're cheering on our Broncos for that 1 year because it was such a magical season, they don't show up next year. I hope they do come back again next year, those fans do. I had an exciting time this year, too. This was the most Western games I've went to since I've been in college. I usually picked about 1 to go to per year, but with just such a special season they were having, I didn't want to stay away. I mean, the first game I went to was the Northwestern game on the road. I wanted to go down and, you know, number 1, to go see them play at Northwestern. I loved traveling on the road to see them play. And it was the first time I'd ever been on a road game when they won. So that was incredible. And then, of course, you know, we came back for homecoming. We saw that. And then game day came around. You know, so the home games we saw Buffalo, we saw Eastern, we saw Toledo, we saw the MAC championship game against Ohio. We ended up seeing, I think, every home game except for 2, and that was a Georgia Southern and North Carolina Central game, and that was just because I ended up working on those 2 Saturdays. And that's why I really haven't been to a lot of Western games, is because most of the times they fell when I was working on a Saturday. This year it worked out where they didn't fall, and you know, on a weekend where I worked, and so I could go. So that was really neat to see. Northern Illinois, that was the homecoming game. So Northern Illinois, Eastern Buffalo, Toledo, Northwestern, Ohio, seeing 6 games, the MAC championship game. All that's incredible. Now looking forward to next year, Western actually opens on the road at USC and then at Michigan State the following week. That's going to be the 2 really tough games. Now, if Michigan State isn't any better than what they were this year, that I would say is a very winnable game. USC was looking winnable early in the year until Sam Donard started playing quarterback for USC, and now that's going to be a really tough game for the Broncos, especially with a lot of the players that are graduating. Zach Terrell, he's going to be graduating. Corey Davis, obviously. I believe Carrington Thompson, Michael Henry, too. So they're going to have a new quarterback. They're going to have a whole new receiving core. They're going to have some new offensive linemen. But their running backs, Franklin and Bogan, will still be there. And they're still going to have some guys on the defensive side of the ball, too. So Western, next year, question marks might be on the offensive side. They might not have as great of a season what they had this year, but you never know. It could happen. They could pull those upsets early on. But definitely MAC title hopes, I believe, are definitely still alive for next year big time. So congrats to Western, on having the great season and having the Cotton Bowl experience. I know we didn't come away with the victory, but you know what? Still very proud of this team and look forward to next season. So let's now talk about the Michigan Wolverines and their final game of the season, which was basically a tale of 2 halves. Florida State dominated the first half. In fact, they looked like what Wisconsin did in the Cotton Bowl and looked like they were going to run Michigan out of the building early on. In fact, it was 20-6 at halftime. Michigan, was still in it. They started playing better defense in the second quarter. Dalvin Cook ran all over Michigan in the first quarter, had a big pass catch as well, and that's when it looked like Florida State was going to run out of the building. Wilton Speight looked absolutely terrible in this game. In fact, I had said on Twitter that he really had regressed throughout the year. If you remember Jake Rudock last year, how he started against Utah, was so-so, but then by the end of the year, Jake Rudock was a fantastic quarterback, played really well at that position. And Wilton Speight started out pretty good, but then it seemed to be, in Iowa he regressed. He didn't play against Indiana. Ohio State he wasn't that great. And here in this game he wasn't that great either against Florida State, to tell you the truth. When I posted that comment that it looked like he had been regressing, all of a sudden he drives Michigan down and scores a touchdown, and they make it 20-15. I might have made the comment a little bit later. It was like, because it was 27-15, and then I made that comment that was 27-22, and I'm like, whoa! All of a sudden he came on there and started playing well. But I think Michigan in the game, they went for 2 too early in the game. They should have just kicked the extra point, made it 20-16, and then later on go for 2. Now here's why. I'm going to tell you why right here. Now, obviously everything that happened would have had to happen. So if they had kicked the extra point, things could have changed, definitely. But it's 20-16. Florida State scores, makes it 27-16. Michigan scores a touchdown. It's now 27-22. They go for 2. It's 27-24. They get the touchdown to go ahead. It's 31-27. Florida State gets that touchdown to go up 33-31. But think about that. Michigan blocked the extra point and took it back. If they had not went for 2 early and went for 2 later and got it like they had, it would have been 33-33. We'd be going overtime. That's what it would have been. So I think Michigan went for 2 too early. Plus, it was so crazy. Chris Evans gets the touchdown run, and then Florida State, the returner, looks like he's going to just take a knee, and one guy's getting so upset. The Florida State guy's like, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then he goes all the way down the field and gets it down there, setting up in field goal range already for Florida State to, possibly tie. Instead, they go for the lead, which Francois hits a guy over Jordan Lewis, which, congrats, you just beat our best corner on that. And then Michigan got the ball back, and they couldn't do anything. But by the way, that 4th down play, that was offsides. The refs did not call it. It was terrible. We can debate this all day, but if you go back and look at a replay and they show the line of scrimmage there and they draw the line where the line of scrimmage is, you will see the Florida State player jumped before the ball was even snapped. Now, would it have mattered in the long run? It might not have, but it would have given Michigan another play at least, and maybe Wilton Speight would have done something on it, unlike he did on those 3 other plays that drive. So Wilton Speight ended up 21-38, 163 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Now, DeAndre Francois was not great at all for Florida State. 9 of 27. That's terrible. But he threw for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. 1 interception, by the way, which was a pick 6, by the way, for Michigan, which was the one that made it 20-15. So it was not that one I had said that he regressed. It was before that. And then all of a sudden he scores a touchdown, which was crazy. So Michigan had 89 rushing yards on the day. Evans led them with 49 on 8 carries. Dalvin Cook, 20 carries, 145 yards and a touchdown. But he got most of those in the first half. He had, I think, at least 40 or so of those in the first quarter, if not, close to 100 before the end of the first half. So he didn't do a whole lot in the second half, really. He did have a big run in the second half, I guess. It was about a 60, 70-yard run. So he ended up having about 110 of those yards on 2 carries. So the rest of the game, he didn't do a whole lot. Jake Buck got hurt in this game, of course, and Jabril Peppers didn't play. That hurt Michigan. I don't know how much it really hurt him. He probably would have made a couple more plays. On offense, really, without Jake Butt there, I mean, Ian Bunting, the other tight end, really stepped up. Caught some passes in the second half. He led in receiving yards, 3 receptions for 40 yards on the day. Nyquan Murray, 2 receptions, 104 yards. He had the big touch. He had 2 touchdowns. The big one, of course, to give Florida State the lead. The other one was in the first quarter, which was the big one. So, yeah, that's the story of Michigan's game. Kenny Allen, by the way, probably was their MVP of the game, to tell you the truth, before that, because he was kicking field goals and punting all day for Michigan. But just, a kind of disappointing end of the season, especially, Michigan losing 3 out of their last 4, 1 point to Iowa, overtime loss to Ohio State, and a 1-point loss to Florida State. And, of course, they beat Indiana in there. But here's the stats. Michigan 16 first downs to Florida State's 15. Michigan was 7 of 20 on third down. Florida State 3 of 13. So neither team that great on third down. 252 yards for Michigan to 371 for Florida State. How about this? Michigan outpossessed Florida State. 34 minutes, 17 seconds to 25-43 for Florida State. That says something right there that Michigan should have been a little bit more better, but they weren't. 4 penalties for 37 yards for Michigan, 7 for 65 for Florida State. And I already told you the first downs Michigan led 16-15 in that. So disappointing end of the season. Next year, it's going to be interesting because I think 18 players, they said, were leaving. Are graduating, really, off of Michigan starters. So that's 18 out of 22 starters. Now, these guys coming in are going to be Jim Harbaugh's recruits, and we're going to have to see how these recruits really play. Now, he's played some of them this year, obviously, but we'll have to see next year how many of them, how these guys are going to play. Not how many of them are going to play, but how these guys are going to play. I think they'll play okay. I think Michigan will be fine. And we'll have to see, of course, if Pepper sticks around too. He might leave to go to the NFL, but we don't know about that yet. He could stay. I almost would think if he was going to go to the NFL, he might have announced it already. So I kind of am leaning toward he's staying, but we'll keep you updated on that to see if he does leave or not. You just have to follow me on Twitter. If there is an announcement, I will post it on there. But it's going to be really interesting next year. They'll have a new quarterback, which I'm thankful for because I never was a fan of Wilton Speight. I just didn't think he was decent, but he wasn't great, I would say. I just wish Jake Rudock had still been around. That's what I would say. So let's run down the bowl scores, the ones after, the ones I was talking about. So we'll just start with Tuesday the 27th, which was, I said Army would win over North Texas. I got that one right. The rest of the day was all terrible for me. All 30-point pick games for me in the ESPN Bowl Mania. Lost them all. Wake Forest beats Temple 34-26. Minnesota beats Washington State 17-12. Boise State, which is a team that they were all saying, "Oh yeah, we should be in the we should be in the Cotton Bowl." Yeah, you showed it. You lost in the Cactus Bowl to Baylor 31-12. A team that had lost 6 games. Started 6-0, finished 6-6, and you lost to them. Yeah, you guys should have been the Cotton Bowl, all right. Miami over West Virginia, 31-14. Utah escapes Indiana, 26-24. Northwestern surprised Pittsburgh, 31-24. Kansas State over Texas A&M, 33-28, which there was an interesting incident in that game. Right before the half, Texas A&M had thrown a Hail Mary pass to try to score a touchdown. One of their players got dragged down by a Kansas State player, and the Kansas State player decided to teabag the Texas A&M player, which then he got a shot to you-know-where. Yeah, he punched him right there. I guess this guy's kind of reliving his days from Halo, where he must have teabagged a lot of opponents that he shot up and killed in that game, because that's the only place I can think that came from. I guess teabagging's back all of a sudden. A game which I said was going to be really good but wasn't was the, not the Cotton Bowl, the Alamo Bowl. Oklahoma State dominated Colorado 38-8. Virginia Tech down 24-0 at the half to Arkansas. Storms back, wins 35-24. Arkansas did not show up in the second half of that game at all. South Florida blew a big lead to South Carolina, won in overtime 46-39. Stanford, without Christian McCaffrey, I forgot he had decided that he was not going to play in this game due to the NFL draft coming up. They still beat North Carolina 25-23. Tennessee beat Nebraska by 2 touchdowns, beating them 38-24. Georgia over TCU 31-23. South Alabama jumped out on Air Force with a 21-3 lead. They fell 45-21. That was a game that was scaring me because that was a game I had like 39 points on. Alabama dominates Washington 24-7. Clemson shuts out Ohio State 31-0. Lamar Jackson didn't really show up. The Heisman Trophy winner against LSU. They fell. Louisville did 29-9. Georgia Tech over Kentucky 33-18. In the Rose Bowl, which was a really intriguing game, USC won 52-49. They led 27-21 at the half. They then trailed heading into the fourth quarter, 49-35. They scored 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns. Penn State, instead of just running the clock out, going overtime, decided, let's try to go for the win. Trace McSorley throws an interception. USC gets a winning field goal, and that's how they ended up beating Penn State. And then Oklahoma beats Auburn in the Sugar Bowl, 35-19. And in the Outback Bowl, Florida all over Iowa, 30-3. So let's preview the national championship game here really quickly. Alabama, by the way, going to be playing Clemson. Alabama is a 6.5-point favorite coming into this game. And by the way, developing news yesterday, Lane Kiffin will not be the offensive coordinator for this game for Alabama. He had already taken the job at Florida Atlantic, and I guess Nick Saban had kind of, they had a mutual agreement to part ways. At least that's what Nick Saban was saying. I don't know. He might be saying, hey, go recruit, go get your players for Florida Atlantic, and we'll take care of this. Steve Sarkisian, the former Washington coach, will be the offensive coordinator for this game. We'll have to see, does that affect Alabama's offense? They didn't play very well offensively against Washington. The pick six in the game they took back for a touchdown. Well, of course, a pick six does that. Really propelled Alabama in this game. And I think if Alabama wins, it's going to be because of their defense. But they're going to have to shut down Deshaun Watson. He's going to be the key of the game for Clemson. Clemson is going to have to limit they're going to have to play perfect. I'm going to have to say this. They can't have any turnovers. If they have turnovers against Alabama, it will kill them. They cannot have turnovers against Alabama. They've got to play perfect. Deshaun Watson cannot throw interceptions, cannot fumble the ball. He cannot have his other players fumble the ball. He's got to be really careful protecting the ball because Watson this year has at times been a little erratic, not protecting the ball. So he's going to have to be really careful with it. He's going to have to dominate too. He's going to have to score a lot of touchdowns, I feel like. Alabama on their side of the ball with Sarkisian now calling the plays on offense. I kind of wonder, well, how is that going to affect Jalen Hurts, who's only a freshman, by the way? Especially with the national championship game on the line here. This has really gotten unique. It turned into a really unique situation here. How is that offense going to respond? Is Jalen Hurts going to be okay? Is he still going to be able to scramble around and run? Is he going to throw the ball well? It kind of makes you wonder a little bit how that offense is going to play. Clemson's defense, they're going to have to force turnovers because if Alabama or if Clemson to offense turns the ball over, which they can't really to win, that defensive Clemson is going to have to force some turnovers. Their defense at times has struggled this year. Look at the Pitt game. Most part, it's played okay. But the thing is, if their defense doesn't step up, then I think Alabama wins this game pretty easily. On the other side of the ball, on Alabama, on the defensive side, just continue what you're doing. Pressure the quarterback, force fumbles, force interceptions. It's about that. That's really the keys to the game. My prediction is, even with the new offensive coordinator, Steve Sarkisian, coming in, he's been on the Alabama staff, but he's not been a coordinator or anything. I think he's kind of been like a special assistant to the team, really. I think Alabama will do enough to win. Bo Scarborough will be able to run the ball well for Alabama as well. I think, even with this is a rematch from last year's national championship game. I think Alabama once again still wins this, but it's going to be pretty close, I'm going to say. I think Alabama wins it by the score of 35-31. That's what I will go in this. But like I said, Watson, look at it on the year. If you look at his stats, 17 interceptions. He's got to protect the ball. Like I say, he has to protect it. He cannot fumble. He cannot throw interceptions. If he does it, it's going to cost him. So Jalen Hurts on his legs are going to be, I think, the key to the game. Jalen Hurts' legs, can he throw the ball well? Everything really on the offensive side for Alabama. And can Deshaun Watson protect the ball and not turn it over? So let's move on now. I'll talk about the NFL scores last week of the regular season really quickly. Titans end the season with a victory. They defeat the Texans 24-17. Broncos win 24-6 over the Raiders. They send Gary Kubiak out on top. Gary Kubiak has decided to step down as the Denver Broncos head coach due to health concerns, so the Broncos will be searching for a new coach next season. Packers defeat the Lions 31-24 on Sunday Night Football. Packers now win the NFC North once again. NFC, I was right. Lions once again cannot win their division. Just sad. Still had 1993 was the last time they won their division. Wow. Bengals defeat the Ravens 27-10. Steve Smith, Ravens wide receiver, retired on Sunday. Buccaneers defeat the Panthers 17-16. Of course, they didn't make the playoffs either. Not every one of those scenarios ended up going their way on Sunday. Colts defeat the Jaguars 24-20. Mathis also retired for the Colts this past weekend. Patriots over the Dolphins 35-14. Vikings over the Bears 38-10. Of course, we already know Rex Ryan was fired as the Bills head coach. They followed the Jets 30-10. The Eagles defeat the Cowboys 27-13. Steelers defeat the Browns 27-24. That game, by the way, did go to overtime. The Browns had a chance for a second win. I said there's no way they're beating the Steelers. They had a chance. They lost it. Can't win that second game of the year, apparently. Falcons over the Saints 38-32. Saints tried their darndest to come back and win that game. Giants defeat the Redskins 19-10. That keeps the Redskins out of the playoffs. Jeff Fisher was already fired by the Rams, we knew. Cardinals blew them out 44-6. Chiefs over the Chargers 37-27. Mike McCoy was fired as the Chargers coach after the game. And even though the 49ers put up a good fight against the Seahawks, they fell 25-23, and Chip Kelly is out as the San Francisco 49ers head coach. So you know about coaching vacancies, now you know the scores. Now we can talk about the NFL playoff schedule for next week. So AFC wild card, it's going to be a 4:35 kickoff on ESPN and on ABC. It's going to be a simulcast. The Oakland Raiders are taking on the Houston Texans. Now both teams come in. Starting quarterbacks are injured. Derek Carr is out. Matt McGloin may not play either. Connor Cook may be playing for the Raiders. Tom Savage looks like he might be out for the Texans as well, so it looks like it might be Brock Osweiler back in. Raiders won this matchup already this season. Even with the problems the Raiders are having right now, I think they still win. The Texans, to me, are one of the weakest teams that are in the playoffs this season. And even though they're in the playoffs, I mean, they're not that great. I think the Raiders end up winning that game. So let's move on down. Next matchup will be the Dolphins against the Steelers. This one's Sunday 105 on CBS. The Dolphins, of course, Ryan Tannehill out at quarterback. Steelers got Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, and that defense is playing very, very well. It's going to be cold in Pittsburgh. That's not going to bode well for Miami. I think really everything's pointing toward Pittsburgh winning this game, and I don't think this one will be close. I think the Dolphins don't really stand a chance against the Steelers. I'll be really surprised if they win that. In the NFC, the Lions are at the Seahawks, 8:15 on NBC. The Lions, they had a chance at a 2 seed, and they fell all the way to a 6 seed. At least they're still in the playoffs. However, to me, this team has regressed. Last 3 games, the Lions have scored a total of 13 second-half points, total. 7 of those were on a Hail Mary pass that Stafford had on Sunday against the Packers, so otherwise it would have been 6. This team is not a second-half team all of a sudden, and the Seahawks playing at home with the 12th man, even though the Seahawks have struggled this year, I think Russell Wilson and that defense, Russell Wilson on offense and the Seahawks defense is going to do enough to stop the Lions. I'll be surprised if the Lions score more than 10 points in this game, to tell you the truth. I think Seahawks end up winning this game. The Giants at the Packers. This is Sunday, 4:40 on Fox. Giants have a really, really stout defense coming in. But are they going to be able to stop Aaron Rodgers, who's been red hot? Hasn't thrown an interception recently. He's thrown a lot of touchdown passes. I think he's thrown maybe 18 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions in the last 6 games. So watch out for Green Bay. That offense is hot, but how are they going to do against that Giants defense? Now, the thing is, the Giants offense isn't scoring either. So if the Packers get scoring quickly, I don't think the Giants offense is going to be able to keep up. I think the Packers win that game. So that means you got the teams with the byes. You got Patriots and Chiefs in the AFC, Cowboys and Falcons in the NFC. Now, if the matchups I said if the teams that win, Raiders will be at the Patriots, and the Steelers will be at the Chiefs. Now, the Steelers already dominated the Chiefs this year, but that, of course, was in Pittsburgh. I still think Steelers would win, but it wouldn't be dominating as it was last time. But I think the Steelers would beat the Chiefs. And I think with the struggles the Raiders would be having, I think the Patriots beat the Raiders pretty easily because there's no way Carr would be back, obviously. And even with Matt McGloin in, I don't think the Raiders would be able to win. So that would mean the AFC championship game would be Steelers against the Patriots. And I know Tom Brady's been playing really well this year, and the Patriots have been playing well all year, but the Steelers have been playing really well recently. Their defense has gotten together, and I think because of all that, I'm going to say the Steelers are the team out of the AFC that will be the representative in the Super Bowl. So in the NFC, that would mean you'd have Packers at Cowboys, and your other matchup would be Seahawks. Seahawks at Falcons. Which, by the way, both those matchups already happened, except Atlanta had to go to Seattle and Dallas had to go to Green Bay. So this time it's opposite. Green Bay has been playing red hot, like I've said. Cowboys coming in. You got to wonder, when's Dak Prescott going to show that he's only a rookie? When is Ezekiel Elliott going to show that he's only a rookie? I think that would be the game. I think the Packers, with that hot offense, is not going to lose to Dallas. And I think the Falcons, they almost beat Seattle. In fact, there was a controversial no pass interference call that happened late in that game up in Seattle. I think with it being Atlanta, and even though Atlanta is not a playoff team, I think the Falcons would win over the Seahawks, which would put a NFC title game in Atlanta with them taking on the Packers, which should be an offensive shootout if that actually happens, which I believe the Packers would win just because Atlanta's not a playoff experienced team with Matt Ryan and everything. So I think your Super Bowl matchup will be a matchup that happened a few years ago, Packers against Steelers, and my prediction would be Packers win the Super Bowl. That's what I'm saying. I'm thinking Packers win the Super Bowl over the Steelers. We'll see what happens. Of course, we'll talk again next week about the NFL playoffs, and we'll recap the national championship game. Should be a much shorter edition of Sports Talk next week. We won't have as much to talk about, just the playoff games and then previewing the next ones and recapping the national championship game. So that'll be it. So drop a thumbs up on this video if you enjoyed this, if you enjoyed listening to me talk about sports. Thank you for watching and thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more content, and you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Links are in the description below. Until next time, this is Michael Loud, and over and out. Mikey's crew, you guys are the best. Take care.